So first, your typical backstory. I was an employee at a well-known breakfast chain, particularly popular for their wide selection of pancakes, for nearly 3 years. I was decently well liked among the employees and had a very good friend who had just been promoted to a shift manager by the former general manager, who was a really great guy, but unfortunately got transferred to a different store against his wishes. He was replaced by a horrible power-hungry shift manager that no one cared for. So a typical work week for me was 6 days a week, between 60 to 70 hours a week, with Tuesdays being my only day off. My shifts ranged from 8 hours to as much as an 18-hour double shift. Important later. I worked this schedule without complaint for years of my life. Unfortunately, on September 10th, I fell very ill while at work with no known cause. This was accompanied by very severe, stabbing pain in my lower right abdomen. I called the general manager, it was about 12 AM at this point, and informed her I planned on leaving to go to the to which she told me if I left, then I would be fired. Now at the time, I really needed this job, so not wanting to be fired, I decided to work through my shift. I had 2 hours remaining, but it was hell to work through. Finally, 2 AM rolled around, and I immediately left to drive to the hospital. Upon arrival, I was admitted almost immediately into the hospital due to scan results showing an inflamed appendix. I called the general manager and let her know that I was being admitted to the hospital and would keep her updated. Her response? If you're going to try to get out of work, can you at least find someone to cover your shift in the morning? Some people note at this point, it was around 3:30 AM. My next shift that she wanted me to cover was at 8 AM the next morning. A few hours later, I was notified that I needed an appendectomy and it would be scheduled for the following morning. I agreed, signed the release, and called up my manager to notify her. I told her that I would be out of work for at least a few days, but after surgery I'd let her know. It is important to know that I kept her informed throughout my entire absence. I even sent her a picture of myself laying in a hospital bed after multiple accusations of faking. I still have the texts, if anyone is interested. So surgery went smoothly, however they found that I had a gangrene infection in my appendix that appeared to have spread. Due to complications involving this, my hospital stay ended up being 2 full weeks. I was discharged at noon and drove to work almost immediately after discharge to inform them I was out of the hospital and cleared to come back, as well as turn in the hospital note proving I was there. To my surprise, the regional manager is there. I walk in and find both the regional and the general manager at the front counter having a conversation. I slide the note towards them on the desk and inform them that I was cleared to come back to work. The general manager looked at me in utter disbelief. "Excuse me? You've already been terminated for no call no showing for 2 weeks." I reminded her that I did, in fact, keep her informed and had proof. She cut me off and with an annoyed tone said that she'd give me another chance. I came back in that night for my shift, luckily working with my friend the shift manager. I was also training a guy I had never seen before, not uncommon, as I was a floor supervisor or trainer. My friend later called me into the office, and that's when I learned that I was only rehired, so that I couldn't file a wrongful termination suit, and said that the person I was currently training was my replacement. The general manager had plans to fire me the next morning. As shocked as I was, we immediately hatched a plan. So this restaurant was dirty. Huge roaches infesting the kitchen and dining room, black mold, rotten food mixed with fresh food, water leaks so bad the carpet in the dining room is literally decaying, you name it. We have reported these issues to the general manager multiple times, but nothing ever happened. My friend sent the trainee home with the excuse that our labor was too high, and I spent the remainder of my shift taking pictures of every continuous health code violation I seen. I went as far as cooking orders, just so I could get pictures of the grills and kitchen areas without suspicion from other employees. Finally, the next morning rolled around. I woke up to a call from the general manager. Sure enough, she demanded that I turned my uniform in because I was being terminated immediately. I drove up there and asked for the reason behind my termination, and she replied that I was a lazy worker who always complained that they had hours. Please remember, I averaged about 64 hours a week and never complained. Not in the mood to argue, I simply turned in my uniform and left. But that's not the end of my plan. I was one of the only food safety permitted employees. I had just renewed my permit, so all of the information in the class was fresh on my mind. I also distinctly remember the health inspector teaching the class stated that if we wanted to report our workplace, just come in, ask for him, and bring evidence. I went straight to the health department, asked to speak with him, and supplied 7 written paragraphs of every violation, as well as all of the pictures I had taken to back my claim up. He informed me that with the picture evidence, it would be hard for the restaurant to fight. He also informed me he would follow up with a surprise inspection the next morning. The next morning, I woke up and found messages from my general manager calling me a snitch and a greener, whiner. Luckily, my friend recorded the entire inspection from the office. Due to how recent this story is, I will not be releasing it due to it showing faces as well as names being mentioned, but it was beautiful, and it showed who the true whiner was in this situation. The regional manager was slapped with a hefty $7,000 fine for allowing unpermitted employees to work, and the restaurant was ordered to shut down operations to clean. However, being a barely profitable franchise, the franchisee, who owned many other locations, closed it down and ran off. Now, as much as I want to feel bad for the people left without work, I don't. And for the decent employees, the story actually has somewhat of a happy ending, as many have moved on to better things. Shortly after my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my formerly estranged half-brother quit his job and moved in to help take care of my dad. Though there really wasn't enough money, it was agreed to pay him around $300 a week to make up for his missing income. During this time, my half-brother abruptly acquired durable power of attorney and usurped medical and financial. My mother and father had separate financial lives, decisions. Several documents relating to my dad's pension, which were now my half-brother's responsibility, were not turned in on time, resulting in my dad missing out on a one-time payout of $8,000 and lowering his pension payout by $300 mo. My half-brother then cleaned out my dad's remaining savings, about $3,000, not discover until about a month later. 6 days later, our father hung himself in the basement. My dad left all of his insurance money and belongings to my mother. Us children were left with only sentimental items. My half-brother was visibly upset and shaking when the will was read. He acknowledged that my mother was receiving everything and left. About a month later we discovered the missing money. Though he broke no laws, because he had power of attorney, we insisted he pay it back, even offered to let him make payments over a 2-year period. He refused and we have been no contact for 2 years now. Little did he know that he was in my mom's, his stepmother's, will. He would receive half of what is currently a $250,000 estate. I suggested to my mother that she remove him from the will. She did and I'm now the sole beneficiary. He stole $3,000 now, only to lose out on $125,000 later. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several successful, non-chain establishments, and spent maybe a day or 2 a month in our location. The rest of the time there was a general manager in charge. We'll call her Jan. Jan was about as typer as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primped. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server, and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well, and take pride in my work. I had been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless, the staff was immaculate, like on a white gloved hand under the back of the oven, and it comes back white kind of clean, and the food was always top quality. I had frequently been a customer, and was thrilled that I got the job there. I had been in the business for a decade, and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood of the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days you couldn't be perfect enough and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they willy troll children. She would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would humiliate them in front of the staff, accuse them of doing it on purpose, and then give us all the silent treatment for hours after. Seriously. If someone's cash out was off, even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff, until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. This is where Raoul enters the story. Raoul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier and spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a coworker translate between us to be sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raoul. This made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raoul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raoul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position, so I pointed that out. Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raoul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day, and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that, and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time a while later, while filing out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something. All the information about our Puerto Rican employees is gone. She told me with a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order, so I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later I walked back in the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English. Nuu Rosa. Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow. Where is your green card? What are you talking about? Rosa was confused. Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here? To hide the proof, Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. What? Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me, so I interrupted. Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right? Of course I know that. Jan snapped back. Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native. Oh, right. Never mind Rosa, you can go back to work. Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that, and she never apologized. I had already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was the closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raoul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his fine speech was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raoul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all you illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. _______. By this point, I effing hated this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against the health codes, and once her fake mail fell off into the coleslaw and she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raoul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination. since I had documented proof with Jan's signature that he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raoul. The last time I saw Jen was on my way out of Raoul's lawyer's office after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated, at least the ones that I knew about. Apparently there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? At my deposition I learned that Jen was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case and no one has heard from her since. Raoul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time. Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you got your crap together. I also hope you learn to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up a huge, gigantic F up due to your own negligence, now would you? Thank you for watching. Slap that like button and comment your opinion on these stories below. I'm waiting. Write that comment. Seriously. Have you written it yet? If you don't comment, you make a bunny cry somewhere. You're not that kind of person. I know. Anyways, peace out and catch you tomorrow.